final thing that I mentioned earlier on is as we're listening to these heavier parts now is like when I was mixing, I felt like the kick and the snare were getting lost a little bit, and also the bass wasn't quite hitting or having the same impact as I was earlier on in the song. So we've got this verse, and just have a listen to the kick and the bass and the snare.
Gouge away. You can gouge away. Stay.
And then if we go to the chorus. So if you notice as well, the other thing that I'm doing is I'm automating. This is a VCA channel, and what the VCA does is on the chorus sections it actually bumps up the volume for all tracks that are linked to this channel. So in the choruses, the drums jump up 2 decibels. So if we just go back a little bit, so when the chorus comes in now. First thing that we tried was like, okay, let's have a listen to what that sounds like if we leave it without. So this is what we had before, the drums. So the volume's not quite there. So just jumping that up in that chorus, that actually helps it, because you've obviously got a lot more guitars, a lot more stuff going on, vocals are a lot more intense, so the drums need to be pushed up a little bit. But the other thing that I was finding, even though the drums had been pushed up, I also felt like the kick and the snare could have been improved a little bit more as well. So what I ended up doing is I've got the kick and the snare pre-fade, and they're going to another set of tracks, bus 1 and 2. And what we've got, first of all, let's look at the kick drum. So it's pre-fade, so I can solo it. So this is like an extra track that just comes in. It's automated in for the chorus. So if I just go, I'll show you now. So literally in the chorus, the channel unmutes itself and it comes back in. And this then literally what's happening is it just means that I can have processing on for this track as separate to the other kick drum. And this is something that we used to do in Leader's Veil with SPL Charismas, and it is just literally just distort the fuck out of it. So let's just have a listen now with the. So now what we've got is this heavily distorted kick drum track, which at the moment you're hearing this huge tail that's kind of almost like an explosion kind of sound going through it, and it's not something that I want too much. So the next thing that I've done is I've set up a gate, and it's actually being triggered, or like the gate's being processed from the clean kick channel. So it's like bus 1 input, and I'm also sending the clean track. It's almost like I'm splitting it off and it's going to this gate. So what this will do is whenever the threshold goes below a certain point, it'll actually close the gates. Then that gives me a bit more of control on the kick drum. And then at the end of the verse, end of the chorus, it cuts itself off again. So that's one of the things that we've done. And the next thing as well is the snare drum. I'm just going to bring this, and the same thing again, I've done bus 1, bus 2. So just for the sake of it, not for the sake of it, but I'm just going to go save all the plugins. Now with this track, with the snare, if you notice, I've actually got two distortions on set up, and the reason for this is I actually tried both out on the kick and the snare, and on the kick drum I think I decided that I didn't quite like the Devil Lux. Well, the Devil Lux, it wasn't doing what I wanted it to do, so I actually took it off and just disabled it, completely bypassed, so it's inactive. And on here I think I combined what the snare sounded like in the chorus with the Decapitator and Devil Lock. So they're both doing two sets of distortion, and I'm going over the top a little bit so it cuts in underneath. And the mix is quite high, So between 8 and 9. So what you notice when you're listening to the clean version of the track is there's a lot of transient, but there's not much else. There's not much other information. As we bring the mix up, we're getting very little transient, but much more sustain and distortion. So it's almost like the harmonic content and the vibe of the snare might help like kind of cut it through, because we've got the transient information already from the main track. So sort of the snare together. But obviously one distortion, according to me, wasn't enough, so then I've put it through another one, and I'm using the Thermionic Culture Pento. I'm using the Sound Toys Decapitator in Thermionic Culture Trio mode, and I just gone darken it a little bit, cut off the high end, cut off any of the low end information I don't really need, and just mix to max and drive to not an insane amount, but just some. And I'm doing the same thing again. I'm sidechaining off the clean snare channel sound, and I'm using that to control the overtones and the harmonic content again. And so I'll just listen to that on its own. So just listen now for the chorus without the. Listen to the chorus without the kick smash and the snare smash. So again, it's just helping with that, and the final thing that I'm going to do is I'll just show you what it sounds like again without the channel, without the automation for the drums as well. So this is where we were before the mix level. And then. Now, after doing the processing on the kick and the snare to help them cut through on the chorus, and also automating the drum volume up in the louder sections, the next thing that I needed to actually think about doing was the bass guitar, because when I'm listening to that now, I'm thinking that the overall bass volume, or the level of the bass in the mix, is kind of losing itself in the choruses. So if you notice, again, the first thing that we've done is, if I just cycle through the verse, the first thing I've done is I've actually moved the bass up for the chorus, and it'll drop back down in the verse. There you go, cycles through. I did a similar. What I've actually done is I've done parallel processing now on the bass guitar. I've actually duplicated the track a couple of times. What I've looked at doing is I've just looked at processing the bass in a couple of different ways. So I've gone the low end. I brought the chorus in for the low end, and I'm not really distorting that. I'm just. So there's the original bass on its own. And what I've looked at doing is, like, the first track is the low end, and I've just literally gone, okay, 204 hertz, and we're just like looking at like low end information. I'm almost treating it as like a separate multiband, and I've used an LA2A again. It's a slow compressor. I quite like it on the bass guitar, and I've just like compress that to level out a little bit. The other thing that I've actually ended up doing is when I was bringing the balance of the level for the bass and the compressor in, I ended up finding that it actually sounded better when I flipped the phase on the low bass processing in relation to the original track. So when I didn't flip the phase, it just kind of almost lost the low end information. So it was almost, I had to flip it so it actually cut in and enhanced what I already had there. So the next thing that I looked at doing then, the next track was looking at the high frequencies, and it's the same. I just like a low pass filter cutting off anything above 1.3 kilohertz. So more the trebly end. So it's distorting already quite a bit. So then it's more like the mid-range and up. So what I've looked at doing is I'm using the 1176. I'm using the 1176A, and nothing really too much to shout home about. And I'm not really worrying too much about the transient information here. I'm going quite aggressive on the gain reduction. So it's even though it's just a high frequency information, I'm absolutely smashing out like between 7 and 10 decibels. And so again, I flip the phase again. So if we add those two in. And then the final plugin is Vitamin, which is like a sonic enhancer. It's like adding harmonics on top, and so just add those in. Doesn't really sound like bad thing is, it doesn't really sound like it's doing much on its own. And so it's another case where I probably mix this in with the other track. Doesn't really feel like it's doing much, but then as soon as you bring the other track in, all sorts of stuff happens. So that's the middle section, and so that's the low end and the high end I kind of boosted through, and I thought, well, let's put some of the mid-range back in as well. So that's just the final one. Then is I've used the information from these two plugins. So the high pass, the low pass filter, anything below 204 hertz. I've done the opposite here. It is 204.2. I've done the opposite, so I've actually kind of cut in at the same point. And then the high point is 1.34. I've done the same here at 1.34. So now I'm processing this EQ. So this is the final one, which is just take it off a second. This is the information that I've got. So all we got now is like the mid-range information of the bass. And let's just put this, all three of them together. And the final thing that I like to do, and I think I added like a tube screamer, and it is just generally like tone really, really bright, quite a bit of distortion, no mix, just going over the top, and it's a little on its own. So what I've just played then is just the chorus, the new processing for the chorus. When I press the keyboard next time, so we've kind of gone switching between the two. So like individually, again, they sound a bit strange on their own. So the next thing we're going to do is take that reed back on. And again, it is there just to lift up. So the bass is pumping up, and then the parallel channels are kind of coming through, which is a lot of it is just distortion and harmonic content that's being brought up. And it's the same then, like it comes up every time. And I've also got a bit of a fade out. So because the bass channel doesn't, because we haven't got like separate sections, the other thing that I've done is at the end of every chorus, I've got a fade out back to 0. I think I'll do it over 2 bars. Just because if we didn't have it, it would sound a little bit unnatural. You almost miss because the guitars are fading out, I think, over 2 bars. I've got this bass distortion fading out about the same time, just so that the energy kind of comes back in on its own at a later point. Well, the energy of the bass kind of comes back in a bit more naturally. And then this is the same thing for the end, the outro as well. Bass comes up, the distortion comes back in. So if I just, let's take these off for a second. So now the final thing I'll do is I'll just show you the difference between the chorus, the end. I'll show you the difference between the outro with the parallel channels taken off, and then when they're brought back in, you just see the difference between the kick and the snare and the bass. So we're going to start with off again. And then the same part, just bring them back in. That is more or less how I mix this track. I know it's taken a bit of time just to go through and break everything down. And honestly, I've probably spent more time recording this video than it took me to actually mix it myself and actually explain it. Because a lot of the stuff with mixing, it's you'll change one thing, and then that'll have a knock-on effect on something else. So it's this kind of fluid, so it's like cyclical method where you'll start, okay, right, let's start on the vocals, or start on the kick drum, or start on the drums, and actually build a song up as we go along. Everything kind of adapts and changes everything else. So a lot of my thought process when I'm trying to explain that, some of it kind of comes instinctively. So if I haven't explained anything too well, just give me a shout, ask me a question in the comments of these videos, and I can I'm happy to go over that either as a video or just like explain in the comments section below. So